Welcome to Community Talk Radio. This is Project Independence and You, Talk of the Town on LIU Public Radio. I'm Kristina Liu, along with co-host Paula Ewell, Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Services for the Aging, and Otto Loos, who is our friend, our volunteer, our project ambassador, the face of PI, as I like to call him. We had a really wonderful first hour.
Yes.
We had so much information. I mean, if anyone could see the papers that I was writing down, there was a lot that I learned about Mary Jo Collins, receiver of taxes for Town of North Hempstead. And the overall message is there's a lot of great ways to save money out there, you know, and I think so much of what we do on this show is to get the word out and educate people to know, you know, because who doesn't need to in this, you know, things are expensive, and I think any little bit helps, and you don't know how many you might qualify for, but I love Mary Jo's office is really wants to help you and connect you to these things, so don't be afraid to ask the questions and call 311, certainly.
It's not like talking to the sheriff.
No,
right.
no.
I like that, yes.
And I think for us, like part of the segment we were talking about is there are ways we can help through Project Independence and our social work staff to connect people to get them the resources they need, because the calls that come in to Project Independence, it's usually past the point in a lot of cases where someone's worried, I know I can't pay my taxes, am I going to lose my house? And when we can go in and do a really good financial assessment, we can save people a lot of money, and we all work together.
And that's when it works out the best, you know, and that's, you know, always our message in Project Independence, this show, you know, in general, is like the preparedness factor of things, right? So, you know, a huge part of our Project Independence social workers are to do that assessment, find out, you know, what can you qualify for, you know, in all different aspects, and a search certainly in, you know, the tax world, because it can be expensive.
All confidential.
Right.
Oh, completely confidential.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's all definitely.
Absolutely. So, you know, call 311.
And not trying to sell anything.
Right.
No,
We're certainly not trying to sell anything at all.
It's not the business.
It's not the business.
But it is such a scary concept to senior, you know, like
That's why I'm
that's
bringing
a
it up,
really,
because
you know,
people-
like it's how I can cut food, I can cut my heat, I can save here. But what do I do when it comes down to it? And people obviously want to stay home.
Yeah.
But it does get very scary for people. But knowing, you know, first talking to Mary Jo's office and their staff and how it all works, you know, I think it's going to be very helpful for seniors.
Well,
to
you
help
know,
us connect.
Life expectancy is longer now, so
yeah.
people who retired at 65 or even younger, and they live to be 90 or 95 or whatever, all of a sudden, you were pretty well off back 30 years ago, and now all of a sudden you're almost in the poverty area.
Right. Well, that's house rich, income poor.
Yeah.
You know, you can live in a very expensive, big, beautiful house, but not have a lot of income to be able to support the
You
house
know, I
itself.
can-
And maintain it, you
and
know, it's a
maintain it,
lot.
Yeah, I
yes.
can almost tell, like I walk, you know, when you walk in different
Yes,
neighborhoods,
yes,
you can look at a house and pretty well predict
Yes.
that in that house, there's a senior or two seniors who have been there for a long time, and they do not have the money to put up a new roof or to take the branches of the
Or mow the
trees away
lawn,
from
or-
rubbing on the house.
No,
or,
because we all know. I mean,
you know,
listen,
it's
it's
all overgrown.
it's a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, to
Or-
make at any
or
age, and then when you're a
money,
senior,
or money.
Well,
It's either
that's what exactly
work
right.
yourself, or you got to pay
Right.
somebody to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
And you know,
Yeah, and they're actually, you know, there's this concept of the gatekeeper model, which is getting information into people's homes through the mail, making sure they get in the mail information how to get help, your hairdresser, the grocery store, you know, the bank, the places you go frequently. How do we get help into you? And, you know, pretty frequently we get calls in Project Independence from neighbors that say, you know, my neighbor up the street, and exactly that, Otto, the house, the lawn, things are looking off, and how can we help? And they'll say, can you please call them?
Yeah.
And we can't really call into someone's house and say, but we could drop information off, we can send it through the mail, but now we're going to focus on that one place and try to find out who lives there and how we get them help. And, you know, like you are very special ambassador, but we do say to neighbors, you know, that's what we want to hear, like who needs help up the road,
Right.
and getting the information to them. But it's hard to maintain a house.
Well,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
You know,
For everybody, I mean, and but
not
you know,
just
that's
financially, you know,
right.
physically.
Yes, exactly. But that's another thing. Just to just to highlight a little bit. You know, we have both TRI home maintenance services
Right.
that are free of cost, and we have the rehabilitation. No, I'm sorry,
Rebuilding Together
Long
Island,
Island, which is income means tested, but they. You know,
Yes.
they are so wonderful. They're all, volunteer retired contractors, and they are both organizations. I don't know how they have, must be millions of dollars of help to our seniors, and but it's those things, it's some of those things that can make a difference for you to stay home or not stay home. No,
and we always,
put the light on.
we
I
always
can't get up
exactly.
the steps. I need a guard. I need, just a grab bar in the bathroom. Basic things that people can't do, we can get into the house. So.
Well, that's the visible stuff.
Right.
Like the outside is visible, but
Yes.
what goes on inside,
Right.
like you just mentioned about grab bars, or we talked a lot of times about toilet seat or light bulbs, only one light bulb in the room still working, and I can't get up there to change.
Yeah, because it's a lot of things that like you take for granted, when you're younger, and I remember when we had originally met with the Rehabilitation Institute to, make this partnership, for the Help at Home program. And it was really a big thing is, changing a light bulb, changing the batteries in your smoke detector. It's like these things that, seem, frivolous, but really do make or break you living in your home. We're always, do not stand on a step stool, or, as you get older, like these crazy. And
I just thought about something, like you mentioned smoke detectors, right? Sometimes the smoke detector goes off, and it beeps, and you can't find it.
Oh, right.
But if you can find it and you can't get to it, it'll just beep until the battery dies.
Goes.
Yeah.
If you think about it,
imagine?
I never really thought about that. I mean, it could happen.
Yeah. But the changing the batteatries is also something that we help people with. Went through that program.
Yeah, I'm big now on the 10-year job.
Okay.
They don't cost that much more, very little more, and you don't need a new battery.
That's a good point.
You just
I agree.
After 10 years, you get a new unit.
Yeah, and even Otto, what you were saying, like we try to promote when we do our initial assessments, which how it works in Project Independence is first the social worker will go in and do an assessment. Our ideal is to go into the home, because when we go into the home, we see something vastly different than what may come in on written surveys to us or phone calls to us. And that's when we can really develop a really good care plan, so to speak. And, we could talk about
No, I agree.
other things. But a lot of people are hesitant at first to have people come in. And usually when we can get in there, it's like a relief to the seniors, because now here's another human being,
right?
And you can see a pile of mail. You can see the toilet doesn't flush. You can, our staff will open the refrigerator. Is it cold? Is it warm in the house? And then we can, really address the basic needs that people might not understand. How can they get, or how can they afford? So it's just so important.
Well, I think a big thing is you're getting through a trust barrier.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Now there's trust.
Exactly.
And once there's trust, then you got a different relationship altogether.
Right. That's and it is pretty amazing. And our staff will. I remember. So now I'm going back to literally 2006 when we first became Project Independence. One of the first home assessments we did, house visits actually, was in New Hyde Park. And, there's a lot of capes.
Right.
Most people aren't on main floor living. Most people have 2 sets of stairs, down the basement, upstairs. And the senior, the lovely, lovely lady that we went to visit, had a rope rigged up.
Oh, gosh.
From the top of her kitchen step, like the basement, you went to the basement through the kitchen. And she had a rope. The railing was gone. The house was lovely home, but just there was a lot of work that needed to be done. And her washing machine was in the basement. So she used to hold the rope and sit down on every step. 1 step, sit, rope. 1 step, sit, rope. And we were like, whoa, okay, so we said, would you like some help, with this? And I can't, this is not what I need to spend my money on. It's much too. And we said, what if it didn't cost anything?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be wonderful. And in some cases, we can bring appliances up, so people don't even have to go downstairs.
But
So this,
one
the
step
little
rogue
things, but they're big.
Without laundry.
Yeah.
Then she had to come back up.
Yeah, well, she kind
You
of.
can
Otto's really trying to figure out the logistics
Well, you
of
can
that.
It was
throw
like
the
an
laundry
all-day
down,
process.
but up it don't throw great.
It was like an all-day process.
That's how I heard.
And
Bunny hurt her shoulder.
Right,
throwing up.
Yeah.
Right.
Listen, I
But
carry
so-
laundry up. It's not an
It's
easy
not
thing.
easy, yeah.
Bring it up to my parents. It's
But
hard.
again, and the underlining part of that is maintaining your independence, like not having to.
And that's
worry.
how you have to look at
Yeah.
it, because I think that that's, as we were saying about trust, and that's really the place you have to get to, is that, the beauty of Project Independence is, as you said, we're not selling anything. We're literally, our social workers and our nurses, they're just incredible people who come in and just want to help you, right? So I think that there's so many things out there that can just make your life easier, and I think that who wouldn't,
But that's
want
hard
that?
for people
It's
to
hard,
understand.
no, but that's what I'm saying, to get to that place.
Everybody
but once you
has
do,
their guard up.
I'll
and
tell
they're-
you. But those
know.
are some of my favorite Project Independence members. Were the ones
Yeah.
that were a little hesitant at first, question things, and then I could think of so many in my head as I sit here that became our biggest champions of the program, so. I think, and Paula was referring to our Help at Home program and our Rebuilding Together Long Island program. I just want to let people know that the Help at Home program, you can get your gutters cleaned on the first floor. You
No
can have
cost.
your
No
cost.
cost.
You can have your AC, put in, taken out. They do a lot of the moving heavy objects. They'll do some light, emphasis in light, yard work. And then, of course, they'll do the, changing the batteries and the light bulbs. Some window cleaning on the first floor. You could use the program 3 times a year. And I cannot stress enough the partnership we have with them and the communication. Because one of my favorite parts about my job is I get to directly, communicate with them and oversee it. And just yesterday alone, I think 6 requests came in, for.
I think we broke a record.
It was just, they
yesterday.
were just flooding in the requests. So, and it's funny because you always know when it's a seasonal kind of thing, which is nice, and that's the point. That's why we offer it 3 times a year. And then the Rebuilding Together Long Island program, a more intensive thing. So, putting in a grab bar, the railings, as we had mentioned, that is such a necessity. Some little small repair objects they're able to do. And, they're a volunteer organization of, group, of men and women who are contractors in their past life. So they're giving back, and it's just to be partnered for so many years. We've, really fostered these relationships is so special. So if you are interested in any of that, call 311 or 516-869-6311.
You just said a magic word, all right, partnership.
Oh, yeah.
To me, that's what Project Independence is all about. You've established partnerships with various organizations, many, and it's not that you're doing the work, you're hooking up the partnerships with the people's needs based on
we're
what
filling that
they
toolbox. We love that toolbox
Yeah.
metaphor, and it's just throwing all those resources in.
That's again how we started. We said it was all about community outreach. And when we started, we started with a grant from the New York State Office of Aging and $144,000, and that's what we started with.
Yeah.
And I was the social worker. I was the Project Independent social worker, and we had a different organization altogether. We weren't yet in North Hempstead that way, but
You were a Nork.
we were in Newark, and only a very small percentage of our population could use Project Independence. And Otto, luckily for
I
all
was
of us,
one of them.
was
Thank
one
God.
of those.
Best gift to Project
best gift,
Independence, really.
best gift.
Gift to us.
But it's just so we just so respect what the seniors have given to us and to the community. So when we went out in the community, it was like everyone wanted to be part of Project Independence. The seniors, we had to do more work as far as this is what we do, but the partnerships were like, it was wonderful because I worked many years in nursing homes, and I remember so many people looking at them and saying, what are they doing here? Why aren't they home? What was going on that they couldn't stay home? And people would come in and just say, I want to go home, I want to go home. And it stays in your mind, especially as a social worker. So when we had this opportunity to build something that was completely never built in our world, and to be part of that, it was just so wonderful.
You just, again, hit some nerves. They want to stay home, and many times it turns out that people get put into nursing homes for convenience of their family, or they have no family.
Or nowhere else to go, or no one to help them at home.
But if they are fortunate enough to have a family, I think where Project Independence fits in is they can make it easier for the family to allow that person to be home.
Absolutely.
As opposed to putting them into a nursing home.
Absolutely.
Because you can get support in a variety of ways depending on the needs of the person. So families ought to be listening a lot about not just the person who is the client or the user or whatever you want to call it, but the family of that person or the friends of that person.
Very important, and that's why we work with geriatric
you're lightening
social
their
workers.
load.
Yeah, and it's about safety, it's about quality of life, but like we work with NYU Lango, we work with a lot of different geriatric social workers in different hospital divisions who will call us and say, we're getting ready to discharge Mrs. Smith in a couple days. She's pretty much on her own. She first might be 24-hour care, but really doing well. What can you do? And then we can go in.
Right, it's like passing the baton in that.
We're not a lot of direct services because, usually home care will go in based on Medicare and based on the needs for short term. But everyone knows when that Medicare coverage stops in the home, what next?
Right.
And that's where we can start helping out too.
Because you have had some experience with various
we
home
get in
care
before, and
groups.
we can, many hope,
Well, and yesterday, see, my days are all crazy. Everything's blending to one. Last week we had on the segment, Otto, you unfortunately had some dental work. You weren't with us, but we had an organization called Caring on Demand, and it was so interesting because they really, they were stressing too the importance of partnership and collaboration, in what they do. So if anyone missed that, it should be posted hopefully soon. We'll have it on our website. So people could start listening because there was a lot of really good information and I love that they realized how important it was to partnership with the local hospitals and certainly us as well. But we are approaching a break. So after the break, Paula, Otto, and I will continue talking about what's going on in the town of North Hempstead. You're listening to Project Independence, and you talk of the town on LIU Public Radio.
So I get this call from my grandma, and she's like,
"What's a podcast, and how much does it cost?"
So I tell her, podcasts are like radio shows, but you can download them on any device and listen to them anywhere at any time, and they're free. And then she says,
"I see, but where can you find good ones?"
And I'm like, go to wcwp.org/podcast and check out the lineup of original shows, or download any podcast app on your phone or tablet and search for LIU Studios. And she's all like,
"Oh, that sounds easy."
And then she asked me what an app is.
LIU Studios Podcasts, available on any podcast app. Those little button things on your phone screen. Just ask your grandkids.
And welcome back to Community Talk Radio. This is Project Independence and You, Talk of the Town on LIU Public Radio. I'm Kristina Liu, chatting with my co-hosts today, Otto Los and Paula Ewell. We are talking all things going on in North Hempstead and really the great programs that are in Project Independence. It's so nice to have Paula here because she's been with the program for so long and can certainly speak on the history of everything. But next week, I want to remind people, we are going to have Dr. Sarah Glass on the show, who's a PhD and a social worker, a trauma therapist, and an author. She's going to discuss survival tips for leaving unhealthy relationships and coping with loss. Her book is based upon her story, which is incredible. So please tune in next week. It's certainly, I will try not to cry next week, but it's really going to be an important segment.
You brought up about relationships, bad relationships kind of thing, and one of the flyers you sent out in advance of this was this World Elder Abuse Awareness Day.
Yes.
Paula, you can't name names or anything like that, but with the social work part of Project Independence, do you get many situations where there is abuse?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is like the hidden area. It's like walking past the house and you don't know what's going on.
Yes. And, I have to, for the first time actually, a little over a month and a half ago, we had actually someone walk in the office over Clinton G. Martin and say, "We need to talk to somebody because we're aware of some abuse and we were told to come to Project Independence."
Wow.
And I was like, oh, so they came right in my office. and we had to get, the district attorneys. We had to coordinate very quickly.
It was the real deal.
It was the real deal.
Yeah.
A lot of money was involved and was going quickly.
Wow.
And this particular senior, was very. It wasn't someone who lacked capacity or couldn't make decisions. Things were moving fast and didn't quite have a grip on how what should I do. And it was pretty, I was so impressed with how at the county, it was
a wonderful collaboration.
It was really a wonderful collaboration, and they jumped right on it, and we stayed connected, and until they were in, and we had the report being investigated, money stopped, everything stopped. All the banks were notified. And
I actually they're on my list of people to book for the radio show because of the wonderful work that was going on there.
So this was not physical abuse.
No.
It's financial.
Financial.
But we've had, clearly, yes.
Physical also.
Yes.
Right.
And again, that's something that's pretty much hidden.
Yeah.
So what I was saying before, which is like very, very hidden, but that's why when we can get in and see a person one-on-one,
right.
you're able to
you can
tell.
see things that indicate this person's not living a happy life.
Absolutely can see things. Right. Yeah. And the other kinds of subtle abuse, like a family member that maybe won't pay the water bills or the heat bills, and it's cold and there's no food. But you look at it, there's plenty of money, but someone is siphoning the money
for themselves.
And And so, there's definitely, we're trained to look
for those signs.
Yeah, for those signs.
But what Otto was referring to is, I received a flyer. They asked me to promote it. I'm glad you brought it up, Otto. It's World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Building strong support for elders is June 17th, 9 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. It's actually going to be at Toro Law Center in Central Islip. But you could also, I think, get to it. I don't know if they're having it online, but you can register online for this, and we'll have there's a great speakers, and they're on my list of people to possibly get on the show too, because it's really about being disconnected and how this happens, and really getting people aware and comfortable enough to feel that they can voice these things, because I think the most common forms that we've seen, have been, unfortunately, a family member kind of doing this, and then it gets more complicated, right? Because now they don't want to get their family member in trouble, and it's my son, it's my child, and I mean that's so many of the things that come up, and I think that's what at Project Independence we always say: at a given day, you never know what might really come in, and that's why it's just a testament to the staff, and who really are just trying to get the word out to everyone out there, but.
It's sad that
it's horrible. Absolutely.
Yeah.
As you get older, you have issues you have to contend with,
right.
And the last one you want to contend with is either a family member or a caregiver, frankly,
right.
Who is abusive,
right,
in physical or.
And even there are people that'll say, "Here, just take my credit card."
Yeah, right.
And but they're helping me.
Yeah.
And the money's disappearing.
Because what it is, and that's, you hit the nail on the head, and that's where it gets so tricky, is because a lot of times as you age, you have to rely on people
right.
for other things, so then it opens up the doors for things to get a little more, muddy, certainly.
That's why it is this problem of, control, giving up control as the older person. With the article not long ago, control one way or the other. The older child or the senior adult.
That's right. Otto was referring to his article in the Pioneer newsletter that gives you really good tips. And it really is a good tool for people, because I think, you don't know how to kind of go about having these conversations or what to say or what to think of, and I think you gave some really on both sides, You didn't just choose one side, you put both sides out there.
There are two sides, and the word control comes into play on both sides.
Yeah.
The older adult doesn't really want to give up control of their life,
right.
which they've been doing for 85 years or whatever, pick a number. And the adult child means well, but they sometimes take too much control.
Right.
And, there's a balance, which is not easy.
No, it's a hard thing to navigate.
What it requires is honest communication.
Yeah.
And understanding of both
Yeah.
sides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we know communication is not a strong suit in many people.
No, that's true.
But the other thing we found, which it might not have presented as abusive as first, was with a home repair situation, where you might have
Oh,
seen
like
in
the
the
scam
paper.
world? Yeah, we talked a lot about it
right,
on the show.
But it was a real
Yeah.
thing. It happened really to one of our seniors, and $50,000 worth.
Wow.
And when we were looking at it, they had a lot of questions. Well, is it supposed to be this way? Is it supposed to be that way? And I was like, no, this isn't. Did you need this work? No, they rang my bell.
Yeah, and said it was that roof scam.
Your
that
roof,
was
and it's going to be. And the senior even said, come back tomorrow. And they came back tomorrow with everything to do the work. Mm-hmm. And they started
And this is
doing
a very savvy senior. I would like to, preface.
This is a senior
because,
now a
very
widow,
active.
Now a widow, husband maybe a year or so ago, and the couple knew they were going to need to repair the roof at some point. And then he passed away, and she's like, "Well, I guess they're right. I better do this. The house is going to." And they got up there, and what started as $10,000 estimate was $50,000. And she said, "I can only pay you $10,000 today, and I have to." One daughter who lives in Germany actually, and she said, I don't have this much money, and I have to get my brother, and he'll have to help. So they said, we'll be back tomorrow, for the rest of it. Right. And in one day, they took apart more of her roof that you couldn't even imagine. And then said they found other things to repair. So we called Nassau County Consumer Affairs and District Attorney's Office, and we were able to. It was able to get stopped at the 10 point. But, it's so true. And then the feeling is, how could I have let this happen?
Yeah. And that's why it's underreported.
Company, it's a white van, no better business, just, came back with workmen. Nobody was really able to communicate clearly except the one man. They changed the check she gave them. They crossed something out, and luckily, actually, it was Citibank that spit the check back to her and said,
right,
someone's changing. They filled in an address, and it was a lot. But again, that district attorney's office was so impressive, and for this senior, they lost a lot of money, but
it would have been even
lost
more, right?
A lot more money. So it was good we found that, but. It's scams, but that's financial abuse. That's abuse.
Paula, I don't think people realize how deep Project Independence can get involved with stuff like these stories you just told.
Yeah. We actually get very, very involved.
Very complex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of.
But I don't think this stuff is not in the newspaper.
No.
You're
this isn't not
you're
gonna
like a
be.
hidden diamond. You're off in a corner somewhere doing your work.
Yeah.
And getting involved with things like this.
Right.
It
was very nice. Ron Rowell's been on.
Yeah, we just had him on last month or something.
Okay,
I think
so Ron, we were recently at an Aging in Place symposium, actually that Adelphi held with actually a law group, Goidel Law Group. And they would be a wonderful guest.
Yeah, they're on my list too.
For the show also. But I impromptu had to do some presentation. I didn't know till that day that I was there about Project Independence. And Ron Rowell stood up and said, Project Independence is like the crown jewel of Aging in Place, but most of us don't have it. Yeah. So how do we do this? So we talked a lot about that, and how you built it. Like, how do we create a service delivery model? How do we put this together? And I think that's what's really interesting about us, that we took a lot of different pieces, obviously local government, human service, healthcare, we're Northwell and Langone and St. Francis, but how do you put the pieces together to work the right way? And Kristina and I are geriatric social workers. And to have the training how to do this, to work with, an elderly population is really important. So we're very lucky there. So, but we have a lot of adult protective service situations. Not always an abuse type of thing, just somebody usually
who just can't live on
who's
their own
not able to and is is at a danger. But there's once or twice a week we have a very serious situation.
Yeah.
And that's my point. It can come at any time, usually at 4 o'clock on Friday.
Oh, yeah. You just can't even imagine.
It's usually the running joke. But in all seriousness, that's why Paula, and I, we're like the social workers of the department, and Paula especially, is sitting there, getting the calls from the social workers, working. And that's why it just goes back to our beginning thing about the importance of really collaboration and having these partnerships in, the community, and knowing, so the fact that you can pick up and call someone and, things are able to get done. And that's, testament to what you said, Otto, is that's what Project Independence is the connector, right? And it's just, and shout out to our social workers and nurses who are, really, we always say, are boots on the ground out there,
To me, it requires people just like you two and others who have empathy and who really dig into what's going on with the other people, what their problems really are.
Right.
You really listen to what the story is, and you really, really want to help them.
Right.
You're not trying to sell them anything.
No.
I keep saying that because I know people I've talked to about Project Independence many times, and there's always this little reluctance, like, I don't need charity.
Yeah.
Well,
social work doesn't always have the best connotation either. When you want to talk to a social worker,
Yeah, like it's a stigma connected to that, right? Like, like years ago, I lived in the city, and the social work image back then was not a good image.
You took kids at, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
And it's wrong, completely wrong. As you know, my granddaughter's a social worker.
I know.
Who went to adult.
So is my daughter.
Yeah,
my
good
daughter
for
is
you.
a clinical supervisor, a social worker.
Yeah.
Yes. So they're good people. So social workers.
They are good people. And
not to toot our own horn.
No.
and frankly, very underpaid for what they do.
Well, I can't speak to that directly.
But see, that's a big point there, too, is the fact that you're
know.
doing it because you really like doing it, and you feel like you really want to help people.
Well, you just reminded me of, too, which is we Family and Children Association, who we had on, not that long ago. So I connected to them. We've been doing the Smart Van, so we really have a great relationship of putting our heads, of course, Barry Klitzberg, our guru of Medicare. But we also had Jeannie Cacciatore, who was on the show and she does a lot of the mental health component things. So I arranged with her for our staff this mental health first aid training. Yeah. And it was 2 parts, and it was such an interesting, and really just wonderful for anyone to take.
And all the staff, not just the social workers.
Right. It was all of us, because it's beneficial for anyone, that's dealing with, and to really understand a lot of these things and kind of how to navigate it. And we were saying that's such a barrier for people seeking, how it's like just finding someone that covers your insurance or doesn't have a waiting list, but the problem is that so many people are not going into that field because it is, not the best paying field, so it's something that I hope, things are gradually going to get to a place because it's such a need. And I think, we don't have a show that doesn't talk about mental health, on this, we're certainly just coming out of Mental Health Awareness Month in May. And I think that it is something that I hope as people, because she was even saying that, kids today are more aware of mental health things, so we're certainly seeing a shift.
Talking about it.
I see my little, the little people in my life, and they're way more likely than my generation was to voice their feelings, or the fact there's mental health days. They're more comfortable in this conversation. So hopefully this will lead us into that kind of direction.
I think that, and I understand this because I was young too. When you're young, you don't quite get it yet. Some people do, like you did. But most of the time, you really don't get it.
Yeah.
Like I was lucky.
Yeah, because why would you?
I had a bunch of aunts that lived to be 100.
Wow, that's great.
And I remember talking to them.
Yeah.
My one aunt, I told her, I said, if you make it to be 100, you're going to be an antique. These were my father's aunts, my great aunts.
Right.
And she laughed, and they all had good sense of humor. These ladies, they're all from Germany, and they came over here in the early 1900s.
Wow.
And I was lucky enough to know
them. Right.
And I knew my father really worked at keeping a good relationship with them.
Yeah.
They were his aunts.
Right.
And he
important.
came from Germany.
That's
and
so
the reason he came here was because they were here.
Oh, that's great.
So I had some little looks, but I was still stupid, to be honest about it. Right? I mean, it took me a long time to mature.
Right.
Well, you know what, Otto? At least you got there. It's never too late.
I'm working on it.
He still struggles.
But I mean, a lot of young people don't get it. I mean, they
Right.
really don't think that they're ever going to get old. You hear people say, don't be comments about somebody who's older.
Right. No.
Don't
Yeah.
forget, my
No,
friend.
no,
You
no,
will
no.
be there if you're
That's
lucky.
it. But you know what else is good too with our program is more so with our social workers. But if people need some sort of counseling and emotional support, not necessarily a mental health problem but something's giving them a very challenging time somewhere in their life, they can meet with our social workers privately and just really help them work through different situations that they're going through. And they do it. And we don't bill, we don't get paid, but it's if you come in and
it's
make
a
an
huge
appointment,
service. It's an incredible service.
So we do quite a bit of counseling, one-on-one counseling, and of course we have many support groups as well. But the one-on-one counseling I see as because I'm lucky because it comes in as a service request, and our social worker every week puts in a note, which Kristina and I can see the clinical notes, and otherwise nobody else can. So I can see the progression of how the counseling is going, and we also provide, the partner supervisor and myself can jointly supervise a case. So it's just a wonderful thing to have.
Well, guys, we are approaching another break. After the break, Paula, Otto, and I will continue talking about what's going on in the town of North Hempstead. You're listening to Project Independence and You, Talk of the Town on LIU Public Radio.
Take WCWP with you wherever you go with the WCWP app. Listen live 24/7 to all of our streams, all from one app. Plus, call the studios directly from the app and visit our social media. Download the app through the iOS App Store on Apple devices or the Google Play Store on Android by searching WCWP Radio, or visit WCWP.org for links. The WCWP app, available now on iOS and Android devices.
Welcome back to Community Talk Radio. This is Project Independence and You, Talk of the Town on LIU Public Radio. So let's talk more about the town. We are in our last segment. Let's just get into it. But Otto, I know you wanted to mention a little something.
Yeah, we talked about younger people. The hope is that younger people understand that they too will get older and that they can relate to the fact that older people have problems and they have issues that develop as a result of getting older. Cognitive issues, physical issues, lots of things they can't do much about.
Right.
And it really struck me yesterday. I saw the D-Day thing on television.
Wonderful.
Where they had a bunch of and Dan mentioned the youngest one was 96.
Yeah.
And many of the veterans who were there were 100 years old and in wheelchairs. It's hard for people to get the story that the fact that these people were like 19 and 20 years old when they were fighting on a beach in Normandy. And now they look like, how could they fight?
Yeah.
Well, they did.
Yeah.
And, try to understand that, they somehow progressed to where they are now.
Right.
And accept the fact that, hey, this be you, all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They are here, they're surviving, and they did a lot of things when they were young.
Right.
And that's true of a lot of older people.
And the courage they had at that point, and not really understanding. I mean,
What
nobody knows, what was, but it was so nice and so respectful and wonderful the way they were honored.
Yeah.
From leaving their hometowns to being greeted by a president to rewards, and it
had to make them
made
feel
you
like, maybe
feel
it
so
was
patriotic
worth it.
and so proud.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, the one guy said he was the only one that survived in his group.
Wow.
Oh,
yeah.
How do you live with that? Think about that.
Yeah.
Like 80 years.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of them didn't express themselves up until the last number of years, really.
Right.
People were starting to talk more about the war experiences. And
and that was some of our best interviews on the show.
Yeah.
Where the privilege that we had.
Past.
Yeah, I mean, those were really some of the most incredible things. And it really put so much in perspective. We always mention on the show was the the two boys who were, I think they were like 18. Remember, and they just like looked at each other.
Yeah.
It was the German
Oh, that
soldier.
was Anna.
And they both just turned and ran the other way because they were just like
They
and
both
that's what,
had guns in
right,
hand
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And they were just
German
like little
Army
kids for it,
and
right?
American.
Who it's just like, so it's like to remember these things, and that's why it's so important to showcase this, because I hope that people watching, it does give you
Yeah,
a
I mean,
little,
to me that was really a classic example of, okay, the man is now in a wheelchair, but what did he do?
Right.
You know?
It was outside, right, I guess it was before Memorial Day, but there was, elderly veterans standing outside selling poppies. With the little can.
I love that. I
And
buy
was
them
like,
every year.
I have to find some,
Yeah.
And I went to, and I said, could I buy a poppy? And they looked at me, they said, oh, okay. Like they were surprised that, and I just said, thank you so much. This, it's so much. And I put on my poppy. But like, we don't really see that much anymore.
No, they used to
like
do
it was
that all
a
the
big,
time.
it was a big deal to have a poppy every year.
Yeah.
But it was just so nice to see them out. But we have to support, obviously,
Absolutely,
everybody.
our veterans, certainly. So
Our armed services, yes.
important stuff.
Yes.
The bad thing there is that there are younger veterans who
Yes.
are hidden more. They like I know.
Well, they're not joining, and
they're
that's
not.
I know a lot of younger veterans who are back, and they're not part of the VFWs or the American Legions anymore. So it's hard because they, frankly, one of my closest friends, he is just retired from the police department, also a veteran, and he, had to figure out to navigate all these things because he wasn't really a part of knowing what you qualify for, and there's so much out there because. I even said to him, I said, call Project Independence.
Right.
You're a veteran in the town of North
Right,
Hempstead.
right,
We could help you out, trying to figure all this out. So, it really is something that I think it's important to reach out to because it was easier when people were a part of a local group because you could just kind of get the word out to that group. But it's to get
a large part of the population were veterans,
Right.
Going back
Right.
after World War II,
Right.
particularly. Everybody went. Everybody was involved. Now it's less than 1% of our population.
Is that right?
Is defending the rest of us.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a pretty small number.
Right.
That's why we got to always show our gratitude, certainly, for the men and women that do that, because I can't even fathom any of it. But I just want to remind people what will be coming up on the next weeks to come. As I mentioned, we have Dr. Sarah Glass next week, who's doing the Leaving Unhealthy Relationships and Coping with Loss. On June 21st, we're going to have a registered dietitian from the Cass Institute for Women's Health to talk about nutrition and wellness. On June 28th, we have the New York Senior Medicare Patrol Medicare Fraud Prevention.
Great.
I'm really excited to have them on and learn about that. And we're also having we have a double header that day, Otto. We have Jeannie Moon, who is an author, Long Island resident, is coming on to talk about her novels and her life. She knows the fabulous Dan Cox as well, so we can get the dirt on Dan. On July,
I'm looking forward to that.
on July 12th, we have on, which I'm really excited about this,
We're going to learn the real
Dr.
Cox.
Arturo Hernandez, who's an author and professor of psychology at the University of Houston. He's going to be zooming in to talk about the 6 secrets to building brain power. His book is really interesting. I was going through it, and it's just so it's really our message of you're never too old to kind of learn something new or do something new. On July 19th, we'll have on Councilwoman Christine Liu. And she is coming on with the POP officers for the 3rd Precinct to talk about
they're
tips for
wonderful,
seniors
too.
on how
Yeah.
to avoid scams.
They're
Lou
wonderful,
spelled
too.
differently.
Yes.
Yes.
I know. I almost said mine. We
did.
laugh,
I
the
think
two
you
of us.
are.
We always laugh at the two of us because she's Christine, I'm Christina, 2 different Lou's, but we both get a lot of phone calls for the other one.
And can I just add one quick
yes.
thing there, since you brought up
Yeah.
the POP officers? So the POP officers are wonderful as to us when we have a senior that we're concerned about and they're not answering the phone or something that
they'll go
doesn't
check
seem
them.
off, they will go and do a well check, and they are wonderful. And then everyone can go, think they're okay, but it's just one quick call and they go right out. In fact, we called them for that one of those last abuse situations, even though they weren't technically the right, but we said we just want this on a report. We want to say this is here, but anyway, the
No,
officers
absolutely.
are so
It's
wonderful when
great.
we call for seniors. So
When-
kudos.
When they do a well check, I guess you first knock
Knock.
on the door and
Yes.
hope somebody's going to answer. But if somebody doesn't answer,
I don't think they try to enter the house.
Yeah.
Like, I think they can look around and look into
Yeah.
the windows, check the yard. But luckily, most times somebody answers.
Yeah.
right.
It's like they couldn't hear the phone, or they weren't feeling well, or whatever the case may be, or, or worse. But, and sometimes it's families that don't live close by.
Well, that's what I was saying. It's like the
A lot of
caregivers
times
that,
that's just
live
they're
out
not
of state or
answering.
something.
Right. So, but I guess you could go in if they had permission, but
Yeah.
we don't do that.
Yeah.
But they definitely go, like, they stop everything and they just go. So,
But it's
very,
nice
very-
too because a lot of times too they're familiar with Project Independence, so we could even get calls on the reverse side,
Right,
of
yeah.
like so it really goes back to that kind of partnerships in the community with all these different.
So theoretically,
entities.
they could call Project Independence
Yeah.
if they have a situation where they have some apprehensions because they haven't been able to make contact with somebody.
Right.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Right.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also want to let people know that I just received our senior advocate. Otto, I brought you one. Dan, I brought you one as well. But it's the new Spring Summer 2024 booklet. We always promote it. It is such a good tool. There's so many different resources. And this is not just Town North Hempstead based. So it's all of Long Island. You could really find great different programs. I'm starting to look through it too because I learn something each time I look through it. But if you are interested in receiving a copy, you can call 311 or 516-869-6311, and I'll be happy to get it out to you.
Now, I think this is great, and one of the things that this tells me is that's why Project Independence is great, because they will help you get through this book
Yeah.
and find what you need.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Get
Yeah.
that
Because
quickly.
otherwise, you're going to go through this book, and it'll take you about a month and a half
Yeah.
to figure out.
Yes, Otto, I expect a
who
full book report next weekend on the senior advocate.
So there's just another example.
Yeah.
This book can be condensed into one page.
Right.
You know?
I don't know about that, but
Yeah.
I know.
Well,
but
you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
You
He has
know,
he has a lot of faith in our
they can-
PI
you
team.
can shrink the book by
yes,
quite a
yes,
bit.
yes.
But it's really, really great. And also, I want to encourage people to sign up for our email newsletter. We call it the Bible of our department
Yes, my
because
Bible, sure.
we print it out and it's our go-to to see what's going on. Because what's nice about doing this is I get to get all information, not just from, obviously Project Independence, but gathering everything else that's going on in the town of North Hempstead with all different departments. So call 311-516-869-6311. And if you do not have email, I will be happy to. My list is growing quite large, I must say,
it's great.
of people requesting a hard copy of it. It started off with a handful. Now I think
Once
I'm
in
up
a
to
while.
like 20 people.
Right.
Can you print
They like the
labels?
mail.
Yes, I print the labels. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And I do it as soon as it gets sent out. I do my mail copies too. But I like that people. And after the radio show, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, I had said that. And I got so many calls
Right, yeah.
for people asking to mail it out. So I'm glad because the goal is just to get the word out. So
Yes.
any way that we can is certainly the best. But I just want to remind people a lot of programs kind of slow down in these summer months, but we are still in June. So we have a bunch of stuff still going on. We have our Blankets of Love group. We'll still be meeting on Tuesdays. What is today's date? Today's the 7th. So we still have the 11th, the 18th, and the 25th.
There's a nice picture in a local newspaper.
Of the Blankets of Love?
Yeah.
Oh, great. That's so great. I got to see that. That's really wonderful. They are, every week I say how incredible they are because they really do. Otto has it. If you are watching us on North Hempstead TV, you will see this
wonderful. That's the
fabulous
kidney
photo
transplant, the gentleman.
yes, the Blankets of
Oh,
Love
that was
donates to
amazing.
kidney transplant recipient.
He's also in the group.
Yes.
You can have
He's
that.
a member.
Thank you,
of
because
the
I'm really
group.
glad. I didn't know this actually happened because I reached out
Actually,
to.
in one of the papers is actually a bigger photograph.
Oh, that's really nice because I'm glad the article happened because communications. I was working
yeah.
with communications on this, and it's great to see it got picked up because on top of obviously the great work that they do for so many organizations, and I don't even know what they're up to at this point just for this year alone. There's
in the hundreds
yeah, it has to
already.
be, yeah. But they also made it for someone who's a recipient in the group who is going through some tough times, but doing well. So I'm really glad. It makes me really happy. This article. Thank you, Otto, for sharing that. We also have our St. Francis cardiac screening van is making its rounds. The next one is Thursday, June 13th, and that is going to be at Manhasset Valley Residence from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. For these St. Francis cardiac screenings, you do not need to make an appointment. You can get your blood pressure checked, a simple test for cholesterol, some diabetes screenings, and a lot of information. It always sticks with me, the people that would go in and get their pressure taken and then get sent to the emergency room, so it's important to get these screenings. And I love any kind of thing that you can kind of just walk on, it's just, I feel like it takes the pressure off, and if you're in the area, you could certainly check it out. We still have our bridge class is still meeting some dates in June. We have June 12th and June 26th. There is a beginner class. You don't have to have any knowledge of how to play the game, an intermediate class. And it's done by Alverna Lewis, who is a PI volunteer, and it grew. Paula, I shared our story when Paula was with me when we sat down with Alverna, and she gave us the ins and outs of bridge, and we were all sitting there like, this is so much more complicated than I knew bridge was. I thought, you kind of just play. You always hear it, but the brain game component to it, you really, there's just so many benefits.
It's one of the card games I never played.
Yeah.
But there used to be a thing in the newspapers years ago, I think it was called Goring on Bridge.
Yes.
And they would show you all these maneuvers.
Yeah, because
Right.
we have we copy a booklet for the participants, and there are all these acronyms and it's all these it's such a really good game to keep your brain sharp, and it was just so great.
Alberta was part of a group of seniors that went into schools
Yes.
to teach
really?
younger students.
Yeah.
Like they wanted to introduce this game.
Yes,
to the
because she
younger
was an
people.
educator for many,
Right.
many years, Alverna,
they
and she
loved
retired
these
now.
things.
Well, I
They
mean,
love to
card
teach it.
games in general were a big deal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Going
yes,
back, all right?
Yes.
I don't know how many people play cards now.
Listen, my group of friends, every once in a while, we'll do something, and it's fun. Every time we're like, we should do this more.
What do you play?
Yeah.
It's just all different things, poker,
Like-
a little Texas Hold'em. Yeah.
Black slapjack
Yeah.
or whatever.
Let me tell you about Slapjack. Was little Kristina's favorite game. I would play it with my grandparents at their round kitchen table. I could picture it in my head.
Yeah, that didn't require
That
a
was
lot of-
I loved it. I also was the queen of solitaire, which is nice when you're alone. I loved solitaire as a
Well, now
little
you
girl.
can play that on here.
You can. Yeah, so there's fun little things, and I also think it's kind of a nostalgic little shout out to
I
do
used
with
to
your
play
family.
cards. I remember my father and mother would play pinochle, which
Mm-hmm.
nobody plays pinochle anymore, and it would be a different deck of cards. And they had one. My father had his best man was a bachelor basically, and he would come over for dinner, and the four of us would wind up playing pinochle.
Aw, that's
I must have
nice.
been like 6 years old. I learned how to play.
But that's what
Great.
Alverna was saying. She said with
Yeah,
her family,
yeah,
she said
right.
they all, they have crazy games. So it's a fun, and it's inexpensive. A lot of these kind of card
They're
game
having
things
a
to do.
tournament
That's right, they are.
at Yes We Can on June 20th. They're very excited. They
Oh,
used to
bridge
do
tournament?
it. Yes,
Oh,
for,
really?
for this particular
It's a
group.
very competitive game.
Yeah, well, they're that's one of the brand new things that we're doing this year over at Yes We Can. We're
Yeah.
really trying to focus because everyone is a volunteer.
Yeah, I know they tried it with canasta.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it didn't work out.
No.
You had a handful of people that
Yes.
would play, and then one got sick, and this and that, and the
Yeah.
next thing.
Yeah, but that's what's nice about PI. It's like we pilot these programs, and see
how it goes.
see how it goes,
it's a
and
good way
really
to put
listen.
it, pilot.
Yeah, because
That's a
not
pilot
every
that didn't work,
Right. Some people, it's
Pretty
really
much how we do
depends.
all
Yeah.
the programs. We
I know
keep them
this
6
bridge
months.
program, they
Yeah.
started off so small, I remember, and now it's really just gained momentum because that's what, people, it just worked for that center, and it was just great. And we have a puzzle group, which is called Puzzle Time,
this
and
is
that's
new. This
meeting
is
at
really good.
Homestead on Wednesdays. And this is also going to kind of segue to other kind of games they started with puzzles. But they have a great participation rate
Like
too.
big
Yeah.
puzzles.
And I was
Yeah.
and you get like a little mat,
I
and
do puzzles.
And they
it's
roll
nice.
it
Yeah,
up
see?
at the end
Yeah.
of the group. The group does it together.
During COVID, I did a lot of puzzles.
That was the
wow,
go-to.
yeah.
LAS. That was
Right.
certainly the go-to. But it's really nice, and it's social, and it's a fun thing to do. And the nurse and
We have
social
nurse and social
worker.
worker
Yeah,
doing
they're
it.
there.
So we could incorporate blood pressure, like whatever.
Yeah.
They can go off separately and speak to a nurse or.
See, because that's what I think is so nice about PI. In the recent years, it really kind of segued into doing a lot of these, fun social things. But they're still under the leadership of a social worker and a nurse. So you're kind of getting to, your way in, but then say, oh my God, and now you're meeting the social worker and nurse. So you're more comfortable to maybe come to them with some kind of,
trust.
Yeah, it does. And that's always and that's, I think, the best plan for anyone, to really build it in a kind of a fun way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we believe in this show, certainly. Get the message out while laughing through it, We have our Golden Hearts Bingo and blood pressure screenings. That's on Thursdays at Roslyn Community Center. Our social discussion group that is virtual that meets on Thursdays. I mean, I am just trying to get through all these because there are so many. Our men's group that meets at the Hillside Public Library on Fridays. That you can do virtual or in person.
How many concerts are going on?
There are so many concerts going on too, and we're gonna have to get to it next week, Otto. My gosh.
Well, you couldn't read them all anyway.
That's right. Thanks for listening to Project Independence and You, Talk of the Town. I'd like to thank Paul and Otto for another great show. Project Independence and You is a production of Long Island University Public Radio, with a special thank you to Dan Cox, our Wizard of Oz. Join us again next Friday at 10 a.m. on LIU Public Radio. Goodbye and have a good weekend.